Smith has already finished as a top 10 quarterback choice this season, and he's going to do it again this week in Detroit. We discussed the top sleepers for week 4, plus hit on the best DFS plays on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network. Vinny's not here today, but I'm joined by the great Kate Magdziuk, co-host of the Locked On Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast, senior editor and fantasy analyst at Yahoo. Oh, and also my wife. So happy to have you here. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So today, Kate and I are going to do the normal, typical Friday show, but add a little bit different, something different here at the beginning. We're going to give you our top sleeper at each position. So the guy that we think, maybe you can even find them on waivers, but we think they're going to have a great week, but not being talked about as much as they should be heading into this week. And then we'll get into our top prize picks of the week, like we always do on Friday, and then go through our FanDuel winning lineup. I'm going to call it a winner already. We'll get to that at the end of today's show. Starting at the top here at quarterback, who is our sleeper of the week? Kay, I'll let you announce it.
You buried the lead there. It is none other than the great Geno Smith, who really has been great this year. Like, he is probably one of the low-key most just overall efficient, steady quarterbacks this year. He's playing clean football. He's got, some of the top wide receivers in the league. Like, I know Tyler Lockett's old, but he's got DK Metcalf, who's making big plays. He's got, breakout superstar from week 2, Jackson Smith and Jigba. There's a lot to like about this Seahawks offense, and I'm really liking this matchup here against the Detroit Lions, who really aren't stoppable or aren't like a shutdown unit through the air. Like, this is a beatable team, and I don't think they're going to be able to run.
The Lions are really good at stopping the run, but Carlton Davis, the guy they traded for this season, is allowing the most passing yards in coverage through 3 weeks for the Lions. So that's not great. And then also they could be without safety, Brian Branch, and he's pretty much like their top dude here with the pass breakups. He actually leads the league with 4 pass breakups this season per PFF there. This is definitely a beatable secondary, not so much on the ground. So that's why I expect them to have to throw the ball a lot. That's great for Geno Smith. You brought up how well he's performing in this new offense. 75% of his passes he is completing this year, averaging a career high 262 passing yards per game. That ranks 3rd in the league. Like, he didn't have to do anything last week for fantasy because they're playing the Dolphins and, they're just ruined. So they could easily beat them. But the first 2 weeks, Geno Smith was the quarterback 8 on the week. And I expect him to finish with a very nice week also this week. Now, our running back sleeper, I just want to put it out there. We're Steelers fans. All right. So maybe we're a little bit biased here, but also being Steelers fans, we know how much Arthur Smith is going to use this man this week. And so our top sleeper at the running back position is Cordero Patterson against the Colts. We both really like Najee Harris this week, right? Like, obviously he's the guy we want to start in this backfield, but he's already taken. Someone already rosters him, right? Like, if you roster him, great, he should have a big week. But if you're looking for a running back to plug in this week, I think Patterson's a really solid option with Jaylen Warren likely to miss the game. Has he been ruled out yet?
He has officially been ruled out. So no Jaylen Warren in this contest. And this is a matchup that, I think is going to be conducive to scoring points on the ground. The overall game script for the Steelers has obviously super heavily favored the ground this year. No, surprises there with Arthur Smith. But the Colts are actually dealing with a lot of injuries. They have 2 starters that could miss on the offensive line. They have 2 starters on defense. Kenny Moore, Kwity Paye, both out this week. This could be a relatively low scoring matchup. I think it's going to kind of match what we've seen so far from the Steelers. And guess what? We all know Arthur Smith loves him some Cordero Patterson. He can't help himself.
He really, really can't. I mean, last week when Jalen Warren was banged up, like he tried to play through the game, he couldn't make it through the whole thing. But Patterson played on a season high 23 snaps last week. I expect him to get a lot of snaps. He's going to be used as a receiver as well. Like he is that running back / wide receiver combo. He's going to get a lot of work in this game. And the Colts running defense stinks. Like, yeah, they held it together against the Bears last week. That doesn't count. The Bears do not have a run game. First 2 weeks, they got demolished on the ground. And I think that's going to happen again. I know Tyquan Lewis was also banged up for the Colts this week as well in practice. We'll see if he's good to go for the game, but that would be huge. He's like their best run defender outside of DeForest Buckner, who's also already on IR. So they're banged up. I love this matchup for Patterson. He doesn't have a high ceiling, right? But if you need to get yourself some 10 to 12 points, maybe he can down. I can see that happening.
Yeah, I think there's just a very favorable ecosystem here for Cordero Patterson. Like, if you just need, 10 points, I think that's within the realm of possibility. In that limited role we saw him in last week, stepping in for Jalen Warren. He was also pretty involved as a receiver as well. Also kind of subbing in at wide receiver for Van Jefferson, who I think is going to be fine. But he averaged 8.3 yards per carry, had a long run of 14. Like, he was relatively efficient. So I don't know. I don't hate it. And yeah.
And they're not going to give Najee. I mean, they're going to run so many times in this game, and Najee can't take 30 carries. Like, Patterson's going to get his. And I won't be surprised if Arthur Smith, when they get around the goal line, he uses Patterson instead of Najee or Fields. It'll drive me crazy. But who would doubt that would happen? Now, at the wide receiver position, unlike the Cordero Patterson pick, I actually think Michael Wilson has a very high ceiling this week. It's not like, oh, you just want to play it safe and get your 10 points, right? Like, I think Michael Wilson against the Commanders this week is a great, great play. Like the first 2 weeks, he wasn't really being used, right? But last week, he sees a career high 9 targets and 8 receptions. It was only 1 fewer reception than Marvin Harrison had. He ran only 1 fewer route than Marvin Harrison Jr. ran last week. Like, heavily, heavily involved. You have Trey McBride now marked out with a concussion. And that means that Wilson's going to be a top target in this offense behind Marvin Harrison. And the Commanders have allowed a league high 52 fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. Like, there's room for both to dominate this week.
Yeah, there is a lot to like about Michael Wilson Jr. or Michael Wilson. Is he a junior? I don't know. Whatever. He's not a junior in real life, though. The size matters here for Michael Wilson. 6'3", 213 pounds. I love the mismatch that he's going to be getting on this Washington defense, which, like, I mean, their cornerbacks are so undersized. Like, this is going to be a continuing issue all season long. And I think that, like, we're in for a big, big passing game. The good news is both of these defenses, not great. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored in this one. And especially with Trey McBride out, I think Michael Wilson is going to step up, be a huge part of this offense. He's healthy. He's playing alongside one of the best wide receivers in the National Football League already. You can't just leave him open. Like, I think there could be some big open shots to Michael Wilson here in week 4.
Yeah, I think he's going to have his first 100-yard game in his career this week. I'm going to call that. And then that tight end, the position's so gross, right? But this guy's still on waivers in many leagues. It's Tyler Conklin against the Broncos. And there's a solid chance you might need someone, right? Like, Trey McBride is now officially out. We still don't know about George Kittle, or is Sam Laporta good to go? And maybe you have Mark Andrews, who isn't doing anything. Like, there's so many reasons why you might need a tight end to play here, but Conklin is on the field nonstop. He's playing 92% of the Jets' offensive snaps. He's run the 3rd most routes among all tight ends, and that ended up turning into production last week, finally, right? Like, he catches 5 balls. He has 93 yards last week. And I think this Broncos defense is going to do just fine shutting down Garrett Wilson, because it seems like everyone can. And also, like, Pat Surtain and this Broncos defense has shut down every single one of their opponents' wide receiver 1 so far this year. So Aaron Rodgers is going to have to look elsewhere. So I think Tyler Conklin is a very fair bet to be a top 6 tight end this week.
I love that. And I'm just going to say, like, I know we already did our wide receiver sleeper as Michael Wilson, but I think Allen Lazard could be an interesting play here as well. You mentioned that matchup. Allen Lazard definitely probably going to be more open in this game. And we've already seen Aaron Rodgers much like, Arthur Smith's obsession with Cordero Patterson, I think Aaron Rodgers has a similar affinity for Alan Lazard, and he just can't stop himself from targeting him heavily in the offense. So like, I think Lazard and Conklin could kind of be the stars of this matchup outside of the run game.
Yeah. I'm excited for these matchups. I really want us to be right on Michael Wilson. Like if we're right on these, I want to be right on Michael Wilson. I'm going to have him started in many of my leagues. I'm going to have him as a prize pick. I'm going to have him in DFS, like everywhere I can have him. Michael Wilson, baby. Now we're going to get into our top prize picks of the week, get into our FanDuel lineup. We still have a lot of fun to get into, and we'll do all of that right after a quick break. This episode is brought to you by Robinhood. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhoodgold.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. This episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike the other apps, it's just you against the numbers with PrizePicks. All you have to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. And PrizePicks is making it super easy for you this week. There's one more week left of the special, but you can pick Caleb Williams to pass for more than 1 yard. That's right. All he has to do is get more than 1 yard, and you automatically get that first win. What is also super cool about PrizePicks is that they're the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play, even if one of your players gets injured. Kate and I are about to give you 6 of our favorite picks of the week. And if you want to go along with those picks or pick your own favorites, all you have to do is download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, we're going to each give you our 3 top picks of the week. And obviously, even if you don't play PrizePicks, like we're talking about these guys, we're going to pick all mores, right? These are all players we like in fantasy this week. So it's still going to help you set your fantasy lineup. So don't worry about that. Kate, what is your top picks of the week?
I'm obsessed with Aaron Jones, more than 82.5 rushing plus receiving yards. This is the revenge game. He's going to play the Green Bay Packers. And you know what? The Green Bay Packers have not had the strongest rushing defense. Remember, they allowed Saquon Barkley and Jonathan Taylor both over 100 rushing yards. Packers are tied to allow the 3rd most yards after contact per attempt, 6th highest explosive run rate, 7th highest yards per carry average. And Jones ranks pretty well in those metrics so far. He's looking like a spring chicken here for the Minnesota Vikings. The offense has been surprisingly viable under Sam Darnold. Jones ranks 8th among running backs with 25 or more carries and missed forced tackle rate, tied for the 9th most explosive runs. I think with the usage in the receiving game that we've seen from Aaron Jones, like it's just such a safe bet. And you know he's going to be very motivated here going up against this Packers organization that I don't know. I think maybe slighted him a little bit. Like you passed him up and you went and eyed this other big name running back and gave him this monster contract. I think Aaron Jones is going to have a little something.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's definitely going into this game with some revenge to be sought after. Aaron Jones looks good. He really, really does. So I like that pick from you. Now, mine is I'm going to go with the rookie who hasn't been the greatest place, right? But Caleb Williams, more than 16 fantasy points. He hit this last week. Fine. I mean, the first 2 weeks for him for fantasy, atrocious, right? If you drafted him, it's been bad. 7.7 points the first 2 weeks. But last week, 17.3. He got a couple touchdowns, still a couple interceptions. Those are going to come. But because the Bears have no run game whatsoever, I mean, it's atrocious. They're making Caleb Williams pass nonstop. He has 118 pass attempts. That's second most in the league throughout the first 3 weeks of the season. And he's going to have to pass a lot still in this Rams matchup, right? To keep up with Matthew Stafford. And the Rams are going to pass a ton. And the Rams are allowing just a lot of points to quarterbacks, a lot of points to wide receivers. So I also absolutely love Rome Odunze this week. They didn't have a projection for him yet because they're waiting for that, injury report to come out. He looks like he's completely fine. Love the more on Odunze's whatever, whether it be receptions, receiving yards, a touchdown, take it all. I love Odunze this week. But the Rams defense has now allowed a quarterback to score 25 fantasy points against them in each of the last 2 weeks. Kyler Murray and Brock Purdy. I don't know if it'll be that high for Caleb Williams, but I definitely do like him this week. And I definitely think he hits more than 16 fantasy points.
I think this is just like a nice get right matchup in general for Caleb Williams. Like, even if he doesn't blow the doors off the hinges, like he doesn't have to, because that's a modest fantasy projection. I really like that pick. I'm going to stick with the quarterback position here, and I'm going to go with Jaden Daniels, more than 265 passing plus rushing yards. He's currently averaging 285 per game through the first 3 weeks of the season. He's hit this mark in each of his 3 career games. And we already talked about why we love this matchup, why it's going to be such a high-scoring game here. Jaden Daniels is going to absolutely eat against this Cardinals defense. They're allowing the 8th highest average in EPA per play. The Commanders are allowing a league high in EPA per play. Like, there's no defense to be had, and there's going to be a lot of opportunity offensively. It's going to be a scoring bonanza. No, Daniels has been efficient. He's averaging the 5th highest yards per attempt average in the league, leads the league in with 17 scrambles through 3 games. Like, there's so much to like about Jaden Daniels with this more or less projection.
No, I mean, Jaden Daniels looked so good last week. We'll see if it's just the Bengals defense being so bad or if Jaden Daniels is legit. But this matchup should have a lot of scoring. We obviously love Kyler Murray on the other side. Take his more as well. Take Marvin Harrison Jr.'s. Take Michael Wilson, who we already talked about. All of them. All of the mores. My guy for the second one, I talk about him a lot, but I'm happy I stayed strong with him last week. It ended up coming to fruition. But Amari Cooper, more than 52.5 receiving yards against the Raiders. It's still low for Amari Cooper. And I get it. The first 2 weeks, they could not connect, Watson and him. He was getting the targets. They could not connect. But Amari Cooper has 29 targets on the season. That's tied for 3rd most in the NFL through the first 3 weeks. And it finally started coming through with receiving yards last week. He got 86 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. But the Raiders this week, they don't have Max Crosby. And I know you might say, well, that's not a corner. It doesn't matter. Max Crosby, if he is their entire pass rush, and if he's not getting to the quarterback, that's going to make things a lot easier on Deshaun Watson, who's had trouble under pressure this year. But if he has time, he's going to be able to hit Amari Cooper. The last week, the Raiders allowed Deontay Johnson to put up 122 receiving yards. They let Zay Flowers the week before that put up 91 receiving yards. Both of those guys also scored a touchdown in that matchup. And the week before, in week 1, they played the Chargers. They don't really have wide receivers right at this moment. But Ladd McConkey still scored a touchdown in that matchup. So the Raiders are not a scary defense at this moment. Amari Cooper, that's just too low for him. So I'm taking more than 52.5. And I love him for fantasy this week.
Yeah, I think all of those points are excellent points. And I love the potential here, even though like it's not a good offense, right? The Browns are not a good offense. We saw Deshaun Watson play poorly, and still that connection with Amari Cooper kind of won out here in the last week. For my final projection, I want to talk about Tony Pollard, who coming off a very disappointing game. But his more than projection, 50.5 rushing yards, I feel like seems like a steal. He's played 60+% of the snaps in each game this season. He's seen over 75% of the team's running back rush attempts. This week they get the Dolphins, who may be starting like Tim Boyle. I don't know, Tyler Huntley. Like
Hopefully
this is
Tyler
gonna.
Huntley for Tyreek Hill and Devin Achane to be able to do anything.
I hope so, but like you also know that neither of these options, even if Huntley is the preferred, is going to be a replacement for Tua Tagovailoa. So this is going to be, I think, a matchup that's perfectly conducive to a ton of volume. Last week, he had Pollard had just 6 attempts total, but the Packers kind of ran the score up pretty quickly. He was 17-7 in the first quarter, 20-7 by the second quarter. Like they just spent the whole game playing from behind, and I don't necessarily think that's going to be as much of the case here. I think Tony Pollard is in a really nice spot for a bounce back week.
Yeah, it definitely seems like Tony Pollard is that dude with the Titans. We were hoping for maybe Tajay Spears, and that's not coming to fruition right now. So Tony Pollard should get this, like you brought up. Like it should be a closer game than what it was last week. You would hope the Titans can at least keep up with the Dolphins without their quarterback, no matter, even if it's Tyler Huntley. Like you would hope that they could at least keep that a game. So Tony Pollard should get his opportunities. My last one is Juwan Jennings, more than 47.5 receiving yards versus Patriots. I'm not just chasing his 175-yard game. Like I was excited to play him last week. I did not think that's what was going to happen, 175 yards and 3 touchdowns. I thought maybe he'd have like a 75-yard day. But that's what I'm kind of expecting out of this game, right? Like he's not going to do what he did last week, but he's still going to be a big target for Brock Purdy. Purdy this year has a perfect passer rating when targeting Juwan Jennings. And he's not just going to go away from that. And I know Deebo Samuel might play. I don't care. Like he's going to be limited anyways. They're not going to push him out there for all the snaps. Like Juwan Jennings is still going to get his snaps. In week 1, he still had 64 yards and he was playing with all these playmakers. So Kittle out there, Deebo playing limited snaps. That doesn't scare me. I'm still taking the more than 47.5 receiving yards. Are you with me on that one?
Oh, 100%. And I know there are those concerns about, some of the other players possibly turning to action this week. I don't really think it matters. I think like Juwan Jennings, watching the game and like watching those plays, they were the real deal. They didn't feel like just the product of, opportunity. It felt like he was the real deal. I think it's going to be really hard to keep Juwan Jennings off the field consistently or just relegate him to this blocking role when you see the kind of upside he showed you in, week 3.
Oh my God. He looks so good. I don't know how you like don't go, how you don't just keep going with that. Like, yes, Ayuk should get more involved too. And no, Juwan Jennings doesn't need 11 targets every game, but he should be getting his fair share of targets in this offense. We are going to finish up today's show and this week's show with our FanDuel winning lineup. I'm going to just keep saying that. I'm going to put it into existence. But before we do that, I'm going to take a quick break and hear from another one of our sponsors. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 of bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. That's a pretty insane offer, right? That means you get $200 of bonus bets to play with through the 2024 season to make any NFL game interesting. I know, like, sometimes watching those Patriots games or the Panthers games prior to Andy Dolan, I should say, it just are not very entertaining. But any $5 to $10 bet can make any game an awesome experience. FanDuel is also super easy to use and friendly. And what's also super cool about their app is that with their platform in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Again, all you have to do is sign up at FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. You don't even have to win to get it. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Kate, let's pull up our FanDuel lineups here. Do you have yours?
I do.
All right. Who are you going with at quarterback? Did you pay up for a quarterback or stay low?
So here's what I did this week. I went with a foundational stack here in a matchup that I'm absolutely loving. I stacked my CJ Stroud with my Nico Collins. CJ Stroud coming in at $7,800. Nico Collins, $7,700. I love this. I know Nico Collins was limited with a hamstring injury this week. I think he should be okay. Tank Dell's probably, I think, almost certainly out if he hasn't officially been ruled out just yet. Nico Collins is just going to absolutely eat in this matchup. And I love this just cornerstone. I'm going to have this stack in almost every one of my DFS plays this week.
I'm so happy Nico Collins is playing. Like when the hamstring injury came out that, he might be limited this week and we don't know like how good he was. We didn't really have a lot of information, but it sounds like today he is 100% good to go. I love this matchup. I thought about CJ Stroud there at quarterback, but I decided to go a little bit cheaper. And I'm going with the guy I was just talking about in PrizePicks. I went with Caleb Williams because I'm going to have a couple other Bears in here that I'm going to stack with him. But Caleb Williams is cheap. So I was able to then get other bigger names in here to go along with that. Who are your two running backs that you went with?
I'm going with, of course, Aaron Jones. I already talked endlessly about Aaron Jones and what he might be able to do in this revenge game against the Green Bay Packers. And I paired him with none other than Cincinnati Bengals running back Zach Moss, who is, I still think a clear-cut RB1 in this offense going up against the Carolina Panthers. I know that this offense was better under Andy Dalton, but I still don't think the defense is getting any better at this point. And I think that I just love the favorable matchup here for Moss. I think a touchdown is well within the realm of possibility. I'm kind of digging it.
I'm too nervous to ever put Zach Moss into anything because I want him to do so well. I don't want to jinx it. So I don't put him into anything. I did last week. I felt pretty good about the matchup. This week I do as well, but I stayed away from him. The two running backs I went with Najee Harris, our boy. We're talking about the Colts defense being terrible. Yes, we love Cordero Patterson this week as well, but Najee Harris is the main dude there, and he should be a beast. And then Saquon Barkley. I paid up big time for him. He was the most expensive player maybe this week. He was definitely the most expensive running back, but without no AJ Brown, probably no Devonta Smith, this Eagles offense is going to have to just be like, please, Saquon, do everything you can. So I love paying up for him. Do you want to go through your three wide receivers?
I already said Nico Collins. I'm going to pair Nico Collins with Jaden Reed going up against these Minnesota Vikings. I don't know if we'll see Jordan Love in this matchup, but if not, I think we've seen that Malik Willis can execute an offense that's at least capable of scoring some points. So I'm liking Jaden Reed in this matchup just as a nice volume-based game. And then I'm going to go for an upside play who I think has been on the edge here of a monster breakout game, and that is George Pickens. So we each have a Steeler in our lineups, but going up against this Colts defense, again, I already mentioned Kenny Moore already ruled out. This defense is just banged up across the board. There have been a lot of deep shots to George Pickens so far this season. I think they're just kind of waiting for one of these to crack open, and just the floodgates are just going to absolutely flood. I don't
the floodgates are going to flood. That's a good one. My wide receivers, I told you, I was doing some stacks here with Caleb Williams. Here's one of them. I'm putting in Roma Dunze. So I think this is going to be the main dude for Caleb Williams this week. DJ Moore should have a fine game, but I expect Dunze to be the one that breaks out. He's a big play machine. The Rams are allowing those huge plays, right? They're allowing the second most yards per reception to wide receivers this season. The Rams are. Dunze's averaging over 17 yards per reception, and both Jamison Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Juwan Jennings, so all three of them just went absolutely off on the Rams so far through 3 weeks. So I expect that to be a Dunze. Then we've already talked about Michael Wilson. I threw him in there. He's on the cheaper side. Love him. And then we hit on Amari Cooper too. Shocker, the guys I like, I'm putting into my FanDuel lineup. But my three wide receivers are Dunze, Michael Wilson, and Cooper. For my tight end, I'll go with this first because that's my other stack. So I'm going with a triple stack here. I'm going with Cole Kmet. He finally broke out last week. They let him run routes. He was sharing routes to run with Gerald Everett for the first 2 weeks. And then they completely were just you know what, we're quitting that. They went to Kmet. He ran 41 routes last week, balled out. And again, the Rams defense stinks. So I am going with that 3 stack, Caleb Williams, Komet, and Odunze. Who's at your tight end?
I mean, this is going to make you like vomit probably, but I'm going with Zach Ertz, who, again, I already said I really like this high scoring matchup here on the books. And Zach Ertz ranks second in terms of total routes run, ranks second on the team in total targets, tied with Terry McLaurin for the most receptions. Zach Ertz only has 11 fewer receiving yards than Terry McLaurin on this year. We know Austin Eckler is officially ruled out with a concussion. He's been a big part of that receiving game. He's got 121 receiving yards himself. So I think this might be one of these instances where, yeah, you don't have your underneath option, your typical receiving option. Maybe they lean a little bit more on Zach Ertz. And we know, again, Cliff Kingsbury, he wants Zach Ertz involved in this offense, and there's going to be a lot of points scored. I would not be surprised if Zach Ertz puts together a super surprisingly interesting fantasy day.
And it is technically a revenge game for Zach Ertz as well. Did play with the Cardinals there for a little bit in his last stint.
For a minute.
Now, it's a low ceiling there, but I don't mind it, right? They're all gross, right? You're not going to get a lot of points from really any of these tight ends, but I think Cole Kmet does have a much higher ceiling than Zach Ertz, so I feel good about that one. Now, in my flex, I got to spend up too because the cheaper guys like Michael Wilson and Caleb Williams and even Najee was a bit cheaper. So I went with Marvin Harrison Jr., which might sound weird, right? I'm having both Cardinals guys in there. Because both of them can go off, but we know one of them is at least going to. So I'm going to get one of their 30-point performances. I didn't want to have just Michael Wilson and then Marvin Harrison get like 200 yards because that could happen as well. So both in there, they're going to both do great. I feel good about that. And then lastly, for my defense, I went with the Steelers. They get the Colts. Anthony Richardson has been horrendous. So I expect TJ Watt to make his day not fun, him to make, get some turnovers, and for the Steelers to have a pretty good defensive fantasy day.
Yeah, I actually also have the Pittsburgh Steelers. Big surprise for all the reasons you mentioned. In my final flex spot, I've got Allen Lazard. We mentioned him briefly earlier and how he might be the beneficiary of a pretty challenging matchup for Garrett Wilson along the outside with Pat Surtain. Allen Lazard's just kind of been that safety blanket for Aaron Rodgers through the first 3 weeks of the season. I think it continued again here up against the Denver Broncos.
Yep, love it. Now to just run through my lineup one more time in case you want to join us and do the same lineup. Mine, Michelle's, is Caleb Williams at quarterback, Najee Harris and Saquon Barkley at running back. Wide receivers, I have Rome Odunze, Michael Wilson, Amari Cooper, and then also Marvin Harrison Jr., who I threw in my flex. And then at tight end, I have Cole Kmet, and my defense is the Steelers. Kate, run through your lineup.
All right, at quarterback, I've got CJ Stroud, running back, Zach Moss, Aaron Jones. At wide receiver, Nico Collins, George Pickens, and Jaden Reed. At tight end, Zach Ertz. In my flex, we've got Allen Lazard, and of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers defense.
Love it. That is it for today's show. Thank you to all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. But for your second listen, the new Locked On NFL is here. Locked On NFL is now 2 shows every day. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso, and then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the Locked On local experts, and you get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. Make the madman Tyler Rowland and the barber Tony Wiggins your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy your football on Sunday, and I hope you all win your fantasy matchups. We will talk to you on Monday. Bye, y'all.